Good morning. The April 2nd, 2026 Executive Committee meeting is called to order. I'm Executive Committee Chair Dave Summers. I want to welcome everybody attending the meeting, both in person and via Zoom. For board members joining via Zoom, please turn on your cameras and state your name prior to making any comments or asking any questions so the public and your fellow committee members know who is speaking. So Katie, would you call the roll, please?
Angela Burney.
Here.
Board Member Burney is present. Cassie Franklin. Ryan Mello.
Here.
Board Member Mello is present. Thomas McLeod.
Here.
Board Member McLeod is present. Julie Meredith.
Here.
Board Member Meredith is present. Christina Walker.
Here.
Board Member Walker is present. Katie Wilson.
Here.
Board Member Wilson is present. Gurmai Zahalai.
Present.
Board Member Zahalai is present. And Dave Summers.
Here.
And Chair Summers, there is a quorum of the committee at this time.
Thank you. All right, just a few comments. First of all, just really want to express my gratitude in response to the really tremendous outpouring of support from the community on Saturday when we opened the Cross Lake Connection. It was a great day, momentous occasion for the region, agency, really the region will never be the same. It's really, really tremendous achievement, and what a beautiful day, glorious day. And boy, that line waiting to get on the first train or the early trains was amazing. So great public support. Sound Transit staff, all board members, and all the agency's partners really deserve high praise. The day was really well executed, and for the weather, thank you. So in today's meeting, we will hear from staff about the path forward for the Enterprise Initiative and be having a discussion about that, a little recap of the retreat that we had. Look forward to the discussion. Also, this is not news to anybody. It's really important to acknowledge that we're working at a really fast pace. We know time is money, and there's also an urgency in getting a revised system plan in place so we can maintain the momentum we've seen and carry on with further expansion. So that's really, the clock is ticking on that. So bear with us. Thank you for your attention, and we just need to keep moving. Also, just like to acknowledge this week marks Dow's 1-year anniversary as CEO. It's been a whirlwind. A lot has happened. So thank you, Dow, for your leadership and keeping the positive momentum going. And I know there's a lot of work to do, but congratulations on your first year in the role. So I'll turn it over to you, Dow.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, for remembering. It has been a very busy year. A year ago at the start of this week, I was King County Executive. And since I took over here, we've had the opportunity to open 3 major light rail extensions. Truth be told, I was pretty determined to get the Cross Lake Connection open before I reached the 1-year mark, and we did it. And I'm so proud of our staff and everyone who made Saturday's Cross Lake opening such a success, including the members of this committee. It was a historic day, and I know we will remember it for years to come. The thousands of community members who came out to celebrate and ride the trains, I think, only reinforce what we've long known. People in our region love transit and they want more of it. Early numbers indicate roughly 205,000 total light rail boardings on Saturday, and that would place that day as Link's second busiest ever, behind only the Seahawks parade day in February. We also operated the system without any major incidents or disruptions throughout the entire weekend. This accomplishment shows what we can do when we rally around a vision. And when we do that, anything is possible. So to our board, our staff, our supporters and voters, past and present, well done. But there's always more work to do. Looking ahead, Mr. Chair, as you just mentioned, we have the ongoing work of the Enterprise Initiative, and the agency is participating in a series of community forums over the coming weeks that serve really the purposes of informing the public and specific stakeholders about the process and then gaining public feedback on the process and what lies ahead. A number of different groups are convening and participating in the discussions. So I'd encourage folks to get engaged and share their perspectives. Sound Transit will also launch a digital survey tool that will be translated into several top languages spoken in the taxing district. We will share that survey with board members, partners, and the public to continue this robust engagement. As we look for ways to reduce costs, to increase financial capacity, to operate more efficiently, we benefit from a wide variety of input. Community participation continues to strengthen this collaboration or this collaborative process, leading ultimately to an updated system plan and long-range financial plan. Lastly, yesterday was an important day on our march toward the upcoming World Cup. Following the final playoff games this week, the full 48-team tournament roster is now set. Our work preparing for that major event continues. We're busy cleaning our stations, upgrading wayfinding and signage, modifying service plans, all to make sure we're ready to meet the demand and ensuring all of our safety protocols. For anyone who would like to know more about how we're preparing to welcome the world this summer, I'd encourage you to take a look at our Sound Transit website where there is more information. And of course, Mr. Chair, in the coming weeks, we'll have more reports to the committees and to the board on those World Cup preparations. And that's all I have for you this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Dow? Okay, we'll move on to public comment. The executive committee really welcomes public comment as an important part of the public process. Comments are received and considered by committees in its deliberation. So, Katie, you want to share what types of comment were received for today's meeting?
Yes, the board's received written public comment, as well as 2 people signed up for in-person public comment and 4 people signed up for virtual public comment, for a total of 6 verbal public comments.
Thank you. And no written comment, did you say? I'm sorry.
We do have written comment. Would you like me to read that
Yes,
into the record at
please,
this point?
Yeah, please summarize that.
All right. The committee's received comments from over 500 individuals submitting a form letter requesting the board move forward with ST3 as voted for, publish an open request to proposals for engineers, investigate more cost savings alternatives, pursue systemic cost savings and new revenue sources like enhanced service zones and Climate Commitment Act funding. Also from Liz Brymeister, Robin Shapiro, Katie Woods, Stephanie Hutchinson, Jackson, and 2 unnamed commenters supporting affordable housing on the Roosevelt North site. From Betty Lau, suggesting staff consider additional approaches to cost savings, including deferment of the second tunnel and retrofitting the current tunnel. From Greg Vaughn, explaining impacts to the proposed modifications to the ST3 system expansion plan will have on property owners and the regional economy, while urging the board to maintain full link extension to Ballard, to South Lake Union, Seattle Center, Smith Cove, Interbay, and Ballard. From Martin Westerman, arguing West Seattle would be more expensive and less efficient compared to buses. From Sean Albert, supporting the Boeing Access Road Station as it would provide access to affordable and reliable public transportation. And finally, from Robert Cruikshank, arguing the board's position is to figure out how to build the ST3 system and not if.
Great, thank you. So following the meeting, the comments will be posted on the Sound Transit website so the public may view them. Thank you for those that submitted written comments. Before we move on to verbal public comment, I want to review our ground rules for in-person and virtual public comment. Each speaker will have 2 minutes. All comments must be germane to the agenda items or items within the committee's purview. Speakers should not make introductory statements, derogatory remarks, profanity, or personal attacks, statements related to a political campaign, or statements for or against a candidate or a ballot measure. Speakers should also not engage in conduct that disrupts, disturbs, or otherwise impedes the orderly conduct of this meeting, including conduct that is not germane to the committee's work or agenda. This is the only warning speakers will receive. If these rules are not followed, I will ask the microphone to be turned off. I appreciate your adherence to those rules. We all appreciate that. So we'll now take comments from people in the Ruth Fisher boardroom based on the order in which they were signed up to speak. Katie?
First, we have Lynn Robinson, and following that will be Eugene Wasserman.
How about that? Good morning. My name is Lynn Robinson. I'm a Bellevue City Council member. Light rail opened up on Saturday, as you know, across the lake. And just like that, a major transportation obstacle between Bellevue and Seattle was removed. Already this week, I have ridden light rail 4 times between Bellevue, SeaTac, and Seattle, and I was not alone. Bellevue's plans to build a Grand Connection crossing spanning 405 will remove another transportation obstacle. This Grand Connection crossing will join a 175-mile trail system connecting Bellevue's downtown and waterfront to the region. As Mayor Malakushian has said, Bellevue won't just be for Bellevue, Bellevue will be for everyone. This crossing will create better access to light rail and enable employees to get to their jobs safely and easily without a car. It is a mighty tool in our climate revolution. It is a catalyst for redevelopment in Wilburton, which has already sparked over 2,000 units of housing in our permitting pipeline of all affordabilities for people of all incomes. Delivering the crossing using tax increment financing is the accelerator needed to ensure major private investment materializes at the scale required for sustainable transportation and regional transformation. We look forward to partnering with Sound Transit to continue delivering critical infrastructure, and we appreciate your consideration of Bellevue's tax increment financing district. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn.
Next is Eugene Wasserman.
Right. I'm Eugene Wasserman. I'm president of the North Seattle Industrial Association. We've been working with Sound Transit actually on our segment, the Inner Bay, the ballot segment, since before it went to the public. We had a lot of help at that time from then Executive Dow Constantine and Sally Bagshire, who was a council member. We had no help from our mayor and SDOT department. We suddenly find after all this time that we're no longer in your project, that some decision was made somewhere, I don't see where it was public, that Ballard's gone, and that we don't see any provisions for going forward. And we also don't believe if we're not in this package, that there will be never another package from you guys because you have no major places to go and no one's going to pay any more money to you guys. I mean, you really have covered the area well. It's a good running system, but no one's going to pay more money for this. So if we're not in this package, we see us not getting light rail at all. But what happened was when you ran out of money, which we still don't know why you're $34 billion short, it's a secret from us since you don't release financial papers or anything, we feel that the decision has changed now. Before we were part of a larger package approved by the voters. Now there's 2 projects in the North King County area, West Seattle and us. There's probably, sounds like there's only money for one, though we wouldn't know because the no numbers are associated with it. So we think that the board needs to look at both projects together with real numbers and to see which is a better project for Seattle. Most of us feel that the only people who think West Seattle is a really good project are the people who work for Sound Transit. Everybody else feels Ballard is a much better project and the one that should move ahead.
Thank you.
That's everyone who signed up for in-person comment. There's 4 people signed up for virtual comment.
Okay, now we'll turn to public comment via Zoom. When your name is called, please raise your hand using the raise hand function in Zoom. And if you're joining the meeting via telephone, the raise hand function is accessed by entering *9, so you can be identified. Katie, go ahead and call those that have signed up.
First person signed up is Scott Kubley. Please accept the notice to unmute your microphone. Please go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, excellent. Hello, my name is Scott Kubley. I'm the former director of SDOT. My co-author Trevor Reed and I have interviewed dozens of national and international experts, including former Obama and Biden appointees, to develop a report and strategy to save billions on Ballard and West Seattle and address concerns from businesses and communities. Sound Transit's current plan costs over $2 billion per mile, amongst the highest in the world. but others are building for much cheaper. Copenhagen completed its most recent line for $621 million per mile. How is this possible? Copenhagen uses smaller automated trains running every 90 seconds. Their system carries 65% more people, and stations are less than 1/3 the size, reducing cost and construction-related disruption. Is this possible for Sound Transit? Yes. First, use the spine as it was designed, utilizing existing pocket tracks to segment service between Tacoma and Everett. Next, build a second tunnel through downtown to serve an automated Ballard and West Seattle line. And finally, build the tunnel and smaller stations in the exact locations that Sound Transit has planned them. This is a globally proven technology. This approach will not slow down early property acquisition and utility relocation in West Seattle. It will not require redoing zone planning or environmental work, and it will not reduce current or future union jobs. Saving billions in Seattle returns money to other subareas to fund their priorities. We asked the board to direct staff to issue a request for information to industry to examine the technical and financial feasibility of this approach and convene an outside technical advisory group to evaluate the results. At the same time, Sound Transit proceeds with current design and engineering work. Best case scenario, we save more than $15 billion in decades of delay. Worst case, nothing changes from the current trajectory. You can find more about our proposal at transportationreform.org. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next commenter is Robbie Snow. If you're a call-in user, please press *9 or raise your hand to be identified in the audience. Please accept the notice to unmute your microphone. Robbie Snow, if you are a call-in user, you should have a notice that will allow you to unmute your microphone. And you're currently muted right now. All right, not seeing that person. I'll go to the next person and we'll come back. Michael Stewart. Please accept the notice. Please go ahead.
Hey, good morning, Executive Committee members. My name is Mike Stewart. I'm Executive Director of the Ballard Alliance, an organization that represents hundreds of businesses and thousands of residents in Ballard. Since the earliest stages of light rail planning, the Ballard Alliance has led extensive community engagement efforts to rally support for light rail to Ballard with a common vision and consensus. We have consistently provided a unified voice of support for the preferred route to Ballard, and that is grounded in the fact that the Ballard Link is projected to be the highest ridership line planned as part of ST3, with an estimated 132 to 173,000 daily riders. Ballard will soon be designated as a regional center in Seattle's comprehensive plan, which means we will receive a significant influx of growth and development. Ballard needs access to an efficient regional transportation system now more than ever. Our community deserves direct engagement from Sound Transit board members and staff leadership on this issue. That has not happened so far. Please direct your staff to go back to the drawing board and advance a plan that brings light rail to Ballard and delivers on Sound Transit's promise to voters. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and the next speaker is Joe Kunstler.
Hello.
Please go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Clerk Katie. Joe Kunstler here. Mr. Go Sound Transit. I'm calling in today and I want to use the overwhelming majority of my 2 minutes to discuss the need for ST Free to be completed fully. Sound Transit Free was done 10 years ago as a promise to the region to provide true regional connectivity to where the housing is, to where the jobs are. Those jobs are not just in downtown Seattle and downtown Bellevue, and yes, downtown Redmond, but also Everett and Tacoma and SeaTac and all the places in between. And as it's Autism Awareness Month, which is a form of different ability, people with my condition need schedule reliable transportation. We need to know we're going to be at point X at a proper time so that we can hold down employment and personal relationships. That's why we need light rail. And right now with Brandy Cruz and Ari Hoffman and a few others circling, like sharks around this current enterprise project, now is the time to make that evidently clear. I would also add that it's worth delaying completion of projects to get them done. But when we do so, we need to prioritize those that have limited political access versus those who have a lot, like West Seattle. It's important we get light rail to Ballard. It's vital that we get light rail to Everett via Painfield. And it's also vital that we connect Tacoma. And I would hope at some point we could have a conversation about connecting Olympia, but my time's about to run out. I will call the Rider Experience Committee about Fair Gates. We need that too. As always, Go Sound Transit. Thank you for your public service.
Thank you.
And trying one more time for Robbie Snow. If you're a call-in user, press *9 to raise your hand, and you should be able to unmute also with *6. Please go ahead.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we
Thank
can.
you so much. So my name is Roby Snow. I'm a resident of Tukwila, and more specifically the Allentown Duwamish neighborhood immediately adjacent to the planned Boeing Access Road infill station. I know I represent many people from Tukwila and the surrounding area when I say we strongly support the funding and construction of this very important addition to the light rail public transportation system that has been planned and taxpayer voter approved for decades. The BAR station would be highly accessible to significant nearby employment centers, including industrial areas, office parks, commercial centers, and especially Boeing Field, which has plans for future growth and expansion. The demographics of this region of King County, including Tukwila and areas of Renton, Burien, South Park, Georgetown, are such that many residents have limited resources and therefore may have zero vehicle dwellings and rely on public transportation for access to employment opportunities, education, and healthcare. This implementation will help spur transit-oriented development in the North Tukwila region, providing much-needed housing / affordable housing and community service industries. Please take all of these important issues into consideration in your funding discussions, along with the fact that this facility has already been deferred once before. We live in a public transportation desert, and our community needs Sound Transit to follow through with this long-planned public transportation facility that was originally proposed to solve that very problem. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you.
And Chair Summers, that's everyone who signed up for today's public comment.
Great. Thank you, Katie. Okay, we'll move on to business items. There's only one business item on today's agenda for final approval, and that is the minutes from March 5th, 2026 Executive Committee meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
So moved, McLeod.
Second, Mello.
Second, no. Thank you. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, no. Abstentions. All right, minutes are adopted. So going to move on to our reports to committee. The first will be a discussion of the Enterprise Initiative, board retreat debrief, and discussion of the updated ST3 system plan development. So I'll ask Alex Krieg, our Enterprise Planning Deputy Executive Director, to provide the report.
Good morning, Chair Summers and members of the Executive Committee. My name is Alex Krieg, and I lead enterprise planning at Sound Transit. And though I am up here by myself, I'll note there are several staff in the audience who may be able to better handle questions that come up today. And so I just want to thank them in advance for their presence. Next slide, please. So the purpose of today's briefing is twofold. First, I will summarize key themes and takeaways from the board retreat that occurred in Tacoma just over 2 weeks ago. And then second, we'll talk about where we go from here with the enterprise initiative based on direction coming from the board retreat and your continued engagement today. And we'll also take that in two parts. First, with the discussion on how we get to an affordable capital program, and then to review the most impactful opportunities across the other enterprise initiative work streams to save costs and expand financial capacity. Ultimately, the overall purpose today is to ensure we're heading in the right direction toward an updated ST3 system plan so that staff can complete the necessary work and analysis to support board decision-making in Q2. I'll be pausing at key points throughout this presentation to create space for board discussion on what we heard and to ensure we capture any additional feedback, clarifications, and questions that board members have. So slide 3 shows the purpose and desired outcomes from the board retreat, which was to share illustrative capital program approaches and the policy trade-offs and difficult choices they present, and to have the board engage on the dozens of other opportunities across the policy and planning, transit operations, finance, and capital work streams that make up the enterprise initiative. And on behalf of staff, I want to thank board members for your engagement throughout the entire 5-hour session and the feedback shared throughout, which I'll summarize in coming slides. Before doing that, though, I did want to carry forward this slide from the retreat that includes a set of terms and definitions that served as a reference and will continue to do so. We heard about the value of alignment on key terminology related to the information we're sharing. 2 terms that we heard specifically flagged related to needing to develop more clarity around what it means when a project or a phase of a project is deferred, as well as the importance of bringing projects to some basis of design, which will also figure in upcoming material. So this slide shows the illustrations of different capital program approaches that we shared at the retreat. We were very persistent about the fact that these were not intended to be actual choices before the board, but rather vehicles to surface the significant policy trade-offs for board consideration. We focused on components that have a meaningful impact on addressing system-wide affordability while leveraging the work project teams have been doing to develop cost savings across the capital program. Again, these are not intended to be actual choices or options for the board to act on, but are the springboard for direction to develop a modified capital program. In addition, these approaches are a starting point to system-wide affordability. We have not yet assessed them relative to compliance with sub-area equity. This will be follow-on work we do in the coming weeks. Importantly, we also did not incorporate any of the additional opportunities that could save costs or increase financial capacity from the other enterprise initiative work streams. We will be incorporating those and reviewing what that might mean for overall cost savings or increased financial capacity later in this presentation. So I'm going to quickly review each of these approaches at a higher level than I did at the board retreat and really focused on trade-offs. So the first approach we described as keep active light rail extension projects moving. It emphasizes those projects that are in a planning or design phase at the expense of those that have not yet entered their project development lifecycle. It also emphasizes light rail investments over investments in Sounder, with the exception of additional trips on the Sounder S-Line and parking. The second approach we described as advanced regional connectivity. The principal difference between approach 1 and approach 2 is that the West Seattle project would be deferred and the South Kirkland-Issaquah project would be maintained. As such, it emphasizes investments in light rail extensions in each sub-area of the Sound Transit District, and like approach 1, it emphasizes light rail investments over investments in Sounder, with the exception of additional trips on the Sounder S-Line and parking. And the third approach we described as phase all light rail extension projects to advance other ST3 elements. And so this approach makes comparatively less investment in light rail to deliver more of the Sounder program and additional parking investments in ST3. It does result in a phased delivery of all of the light rail extensions. And so slide 9 is our summary of some of the key themes from the board's discussion that followed our presentation of these different capital program approaches, starting with a shared commitment to the overall project that is the ST3 system plan, which is about delivering regional mobility and access across the district. We also heard support generally for advancing light rail investments over other investments in ST3, as well as the need to maintain momentum on projects in planning and design phases to refine potential cost savings and understand better the cost risks for those projects. Another theme captured here relates to an interest in having more and better information on those projects, like the 4-line project in East King County and the T-line extension in Pierce County, to better understand cost savings opportunities and how those investments best meet the needs of those communities. Finally, board members also expressed the importance, which I mentioned earlier, of establishing better definition and process around how the agency will manage ensuring that projects that ultimately are deferred, so where a project is maintained in the ST3 program, but no or limited funding is allocated with the project advancing as funding becomes available, how those deferred projects could or should move back into the Affordable Finance Plan. So this slide is more of a reminder with some of a reminder slide with some of the specific feedback and information presented later today. But it is to note that you all spent the early afternoon of the board retreat engaging in small groups across the 4 different enterprise initiative work streams. Following that session, we did hear direction to come back and summarize the most promising opportunities from the several dozen that staff identified, and we'll do that later in today's briefing. And so this slide summarizes our next steps, and which will be covered in the next 2 sections of this morning's briefing related to how we incorporate board member feedback from the board retreat into an updated ST3 system plan. And I'll pause here for any engagement or to hear whether there were other key themes that board members would like to emphasize.
Any comments or questions at this point?
McLeod has a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Alex, I know it came up in our breakout sessions about the car rental tax. Is there a scenario where that could be added and say, if that happened, here's how it would play out in maybe the projections and the how it would impact sub areas?
Yes, is the short answer. A slightly longer answer is later in the presentation, we are going to talk about some of those opportunities across the different work streams. And we have carried forward the rental car tax. I can speak a little bit to sort of the magnitude of impact. And I think we still have some additional work to do in terms of what that means for different sub areas.
Okay, I can wait till later. That would be fine. I do have one other question. On approach number 1, you gave a definition of when you say keep active light rail extension projects moving. Can you share that again, what you're defining as active?
Sure. In that approach, active referred to those projects that are in a either planning or design phase of their project development life cycle. So there is some basis of work happening to either move through an environmental process or having completed an environmental process. There are a couple of projects, light rail extension projects, that are in a pre-planning phase, which means we haven't yet initiated project development activities on them.
On approach 1, there's a couple infill stations that say deferred, but they've been approved for 30% design. Does that mean they're active?
They are being actively developed, so they are in that category of moving through an environmental process. I think the key word, at least in the title of that approach, was extensions. So it was really emphasizing those projects where there's new guideway and additional expansion of the system, not just a new station. So that's the distinction there.
Thank you.
In the projects that are in pre-planning, that's the 4-line and what else, Alex?
The T-line extension to Tacoma Community College.
So those are the two.
Mhm.
Thank you. Any other questions at this point? All right.
Okay. So the next few slides cover how we're going to take those broader themes and begin to put together a new and modified capital program for board consideration. Again, this is a little repetitive of the themes that we covered, but in terms of how we expect to incorporate those themes, we expect that we will include continuing to advance active light rail extension projects in planning and design, which would include the Tacoma Dome, West Seattle, Everett, and Ballard projects to maintain momentum and continue the cost savings work on all of them. We also expect that a revised capital program will include funding to advance some level of planning and design for projects that are not yet in their project development life cycles. So this would include the South Kirkland to Issaquah project, the T-line extension to Tacoma Community College, and also the Sounder extension to DuPont. We've also heard about the importance of demonstrating a path forward for any project that may need to be phased, and most especially the Ballard Link Extension project, and are working on what that might entail now. We will also be exploring partnership opportunities, as well as how any additional financial capacity created may enable delivery of smaller cost projects, smaller cost relative to those light rail extension projects, like the infill stations or parking investments. And finally, we are working on, and we'll have more to share about that earlier theme mentioned regarding establishing a process and level of priority for advancing projects that are ultimately deferred. And so again, before pausing for discussion, I also want to briefly review the list of projects not flagged in those earlier capital program approach tables that we presume to be either maintained or deferred in a revised capital program, with this slide showing those that we anticipate to be maintained. This includes maintenance facilities associated with Link, Sounder, and ST Express, in addition to any new ST Express fleet, the Tacoma Dome Access Improvements Project, and resources to support additional system and high-capacity transit planning. Slide 15 shows projects that we anticipated to be deferred and include the portions of the ST3 Sounder South program that extend platforms and make additional access improvements, parking investments associated with Stride, the Everett and Tacoma Dome Link projects, and in Edmonds, Mukilteo, and North Sammamish, and then corridor improvements on State Route 162 and to support bus on shoulder operations. And again, I'll pause perhaps back on this slide and open it up for discussion in terms of these potential modifications reflecting what board members discussed at your retreat 2 or so weeks ago.
It's Board Member Mello.
Thank you, Chair Summers. Thank you, Alex and the team, for digesting and summarizing a lot of really complicated information from many diverse perspectives. So you're doing an excellent job holding all of the information, translating it, and communicating it to the board and the public. So thank you for the excellent work. I want to comment on two things at this point of the presentation. I want to put a fine point on this conversation about establishing what our path and policies are around moving projects that are on the deferred schedule to the affordable plan. We might have different language, but the last couple of slides, as an example that you just walked us through, projects that are on a deferred, can't afford to do it right now with available resources, but they're still active. After we turn a lot of dials and pull a lot of levers and save money, those projects should be able to move into the affordable plan, that we have work to do to define how a project moves from the deferred list to the affordable plan. What are the principles? What's the critical path to doing that? Because we can't do them all, but so we have to do them in some, at least we can't do them all at the same time, obviously, right? So we need a critical path and policy and procedure and clarity about how a project moves from the deferred schedule to the affordable schedule. So that's point one. I don't know if you have anything to say at this point, Alex, on that point before I make another point.
What I would say at this point is that's something we are working on, and we'll have more information to share in the coming weeks.
Thank you, Alex. The next subject I wanted to bring up at this point of how we're trying to really in several weeks time, or a couple of weeks time, trying to land on a capital approach here. I'm really pleased to see the note to advance planning on projects that hasn't begun yet, like Tacoma Community College extension. We really do have a lot, we really have a lack of information to make good decisions here, because we haven't had the capacity to move into planning yet. So we really don't know how expensive this is going to be to extend the T line to Tacoma Community College. That's why we need to do the planning. I would ask in the approach that we continue to move forward for board discussion, that we add a version of the approach for Tacoma Community College, for T-line extension to Tacoma Community College, that we advance an approach. One approach is 30% design for the entire Tacoma Community College extension. I would like to see an approach that includes a minimum operating segment of the T-line extension. And so I would like to see both of those, please, as we continue to massage the approach that we are advancing. And I'm not sure exactly what I heard so far about DuPont. I'm a little confused about what I heard about. So I'm switching gears to another mode, Sounder South to DuPont. I want to make sure that, so we're talking about potential modifications right now to the approach that we want you to continue to work up. I want to make sure that we have a modification to the approach that keeps DuPont in the mix, especially if we get subject to getting a federal grant, which we believe, if successful, can pay for the vast majority of those costs to advance Sounder South to DuPont. Those are my comments at this time and requests for modifications to the approach. Thank you, Chair Summers.
Thank you. Any response to that before I move on to Board Member Burns?
Certainly, I guess on the second point around the Tacoma Link extension, we can develop that information. And on the third point, I think I would say with the DuPont extension to the Sounder South extension to DuPont, I think it falls into that planning activities for projects not yet underway, but it may be slightly different than how we characterized others. That was bring it to a 30% design milestone insofar as a lot of the track already exists. And so I think it becomes a matter of exploring, sort of to your point about competitive grants, federal grants, what might a project look like, what might a schedule look like, and how do we assess, with doing some additional work, what's possible there?
Chair Summers, can I follow up, please?
Yes, go ahead.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that, Alex. And I'm sorry, I don't have the slide deck in front of me. I should, but I don't. I apologize. On the next two slides, where you summarized for us projects that are on the, yes, thank you. Can you remind us what the current plan is for more frequent trips on Sounder? Where are they in the current approach?
So they were maintained in each approach, reflecting feedback we've heard from this and other committees about the importance of that investment relative to some of the other investments in the Sounder program. Currently, the schedule in the ST3 system plan puts that investment at, I believe, in the mid 2040s for coming online. And I'll just actually move to this slide. The current schedule for the ST3 system plan still has the platform extensions being delivered, I believe, in 2036 or at least the mid 2030s, with the South King and Pierce access improvements following, I believe, in either the late 2030s or early 2040s, and then additional trips coming online. I think that was a reflection and vestige of sort of pre-COVID assumptions around Sounder being very highly utilized as a commuter service. And so the quickest way to add capacity was going to be to extend platforms and buy Sounder vehicles rather than beginning what can be an arduous process of engaging with the railroad operator just to be able to make sure that additional trips can fit within that envelope. I hope that helps.
I think it does, and I know you've heard from South King County and Pierce County that we want to advance more frequent Sounder trips in exchange for extending Sounder platforms. But nothing's as easy as it sounds. It's a ton of work to negotiate with Burlington Northern for railway capacity. But I just wanted to continue to say on the record that our desire is more frequent trips, and we want to continue that conversation and deliver that as soon as we can for the folks who use the very popular Sounder South service. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Alex.
Member Bernie.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for this presentation. This is, obviously a really challenging time for the organization. Just a couple of points. I don't know if these are any to be answered now or future. One, I'm glad you brought up sub-area equity. So I'd kind of like to understand the timeline of calculating that, because I met with cities from the east sub-area, and that's one of their concerns about what the sub-area equity looks like. The choices around the 4-line are interesting. I think that I want to make sure we don't, much to Board Member Mello's comments, I want to make sure that we're able to explore opportunities, splitting the 4-line into 2 other options. So I want to make sure that in advancing, we're not limiting ourselves to any one particular direction. The parking is interesting. I think that I want to know about if we defer / eliminate parking from our program, does it have impact on a partnership, a 3P or a CFD or community facilities district or something like that, to come in and be a partner in building a parking garage in one of our areas? That would be extremely helpful in collecting people from the outskirts, which East King has a lot of that, people coming in from other cities and coming into the system. And I want to make sure that we're not doing anything that would negatively impact those opportunities. So if you can kind of give us more information on that as we come up around that. I hope does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then I guess I need to know a little bit more about, I remember during the retreat, we were talking about, what are all of the above opportunities for, financial implications, grants and federal help and, 75-year bond or whatever it is, the fee on rental cars, whatever it is. I would love to have an opportunity to kind of take a look at those and want to know a little bit of the timeline of exploring some of those things as well. That could be helpful. I think that was it. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just maybe briefly touch on a couple of what I heard you bring up just to be responsive. So related to sub-area equity and timeline, I think today's committee meeting will be helpful in terms of ensuring we are on the right track, both with this capital program approach, and the next section of this presentation will get into some of those other opportunities where we can begin to incorporate different either cost savings or increases to financial capacity. And then that will help us do that kind of sub-area equity analysis that we have to comply with. I think in terms of your point around the 4-line, we can certainly continue to engage in terms of choices and options around the 4-line. The parking deferral, I appreciate the hard choices before the board, and certainly that table that shows really all of those parking investments in that deferred category. We are also cognizant of Board Member Prince's motion from, I believe, February, and want to be responsive to that. And then to your sort of all of the above, I think we're going to get into that in the next section, and at least it may not be all of the above of the several dozen opportunities identified and shared with the retreat, but it will be many, some of which will be impactful either to save costs or increase capacity.
Thank you.
Great. Board Member Zahalai.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you again to Sound Transit staff for bringing together all of the varied feedback into such a clear presentation. Really appreciate it. I did see all of the feedback that I gave reflected in the document, and I just want to surface them once more because there's a little bit of additional nuance that I'd like to share. Overarching theme that I shared at the retreat was I want to make sure that we're keeping all voter approved projects moving and within budgets. We can't signal that we're abandoning any projects. And under that banner, I mentioned that I think we should build West Seattle because it is shovel ready, and every day of delay adds more to the cost. And I know the Sound Transit staff did such a tremendous job in bringing the projected costs back down to pretty close to what the original costs were. And that's a lot of work that I don't want to move away from. And so let's go ahead and build West Seattle. And then for Ballard, what we talked about is going as far as possible within budget. And I know that there are a couple of open questions about what does that actually mean in practice for the short term. And I know that several of the scenarios had us stopping at Seattle Center, or if not all of the scenarios. And I just want to see if there's a path to exploring a Smith Cove option in the short term and putting those up, bringing us a scenario that captures what that cost is for the rest of the North Sub area. Speaking on behalf of one of my departments, King County Metro, there's a lot of concerns about Seattle Center as a functional transit hub for a few reasons. I've heard that there's just limited space geographically for bus layovers and turnarounds and off-street facilities. And we know that there are also a bunch of events that happen in that area, from Climate Pledge Arena and the Seattle Center itself. So lots of heavy congestion there. So it would just be challenging for King County Metro in that area as a terminus. It also, from a connectivity standpoint, the feedback that I've gotten is that the Aurora corridor, which connects a lot of North Seattle, Ballard, Magnolia, it doesn't really connect very well with Seattle Center. And so, if there is a Smith Cove option that we could explore. Again, of course, I know that the costs are astronomical over there, and everything has to pencil. But I would like to see that as an option. And then, with respect to the 4-line, my position is that I want to be deferential to our East sub-area board members. I know there are a lot of trade-offs over there, whether we get to the 30% design for the rail itself, or whether we have more short-term and immediate investments around bus rapid transit and others. There are a lot of clear trade-offs there, and I want to support board members like Board Member Burney and Board Member Balducci and others who represent those areas and seeing what the right trade-offs are. And then I just want to lift up my colleague, board member McLeod as well in looking into that Boeing Access Road station. I see here that it's reflected in finding partnerships and other creative ways of funding the infill stations, and so wanted to uplift that option as well. But thank you all so much for bringing together all these clear scenarios, and I wanted to reiterate some of the things that I said at the retreat and also add a little bit of nuance and extra requests. Thank you.
Any response?
I think just noting that information, we will certainly incorporate that feedback. And then I will also note that Board Member Wilson has her hand raised in the room.
I was going to ask if anybody in the room. Board Member Wilson.
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you for all the work that's gone into it. It's good to see so much of the discussion at the retreat reflected in this approach. Yeah, I mean, I love the idea of maintaining our momentum. I think it's very, very important that we are continuing to show the public that we are moving forward. So I had the opportunity last night to attend the town hall in West Seattle. So much enthusiasm there for getting shovels in the ground and delivering light rail to West Seattle. So very supportive of that. And I really love in here the moving on with planning and design so that we can begin to find those cost savings that have been so impressive on the West Seattle project for all of the other projects. I share the concerns that board member Zahalai expressed regarding the Seattle Center as a terminus for the Ballard line. I think there's a lot of complications there, and would just really, really hope that we can find a way to go further, whether that's to Smith Cove or Inner Bay. And for that reason, I think it's very, very important that we are getting that project to the point where we can begin to find those cost savings, as well as pursuing many of the policy and finance tools opportunities that were presented to us at the retreat. Also very happy to see the mention of high capacity transit studies and ST4. I think, it's clear that we are going to need to pursue new resources in order to get to everything that voters have told us that they want and expect. And I'm very committed to getting there. So I think that moving on and just making it clear that we are not done building out our world-class light rail system is very, very important. I'm also personally very committed to finding a way to build the Graham Street infill station. I think that community has been waiting for this station for a very, very long time. It's a, in the context of ST3, it's a pretty modest investment. So very committed to finding a way, creative ways that we can make sure that is included. So thank you.
Board Member McLeod has a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I want to ask a question that's outside your slide deck, but maybe a little bit relevant. In 2021, there was a realignment effort on the capital program based on a tier system. And they listed different projects, give them a tier 1 or a tier 2 or tier 3. Was that system that got established in 21 factored into how we're prioritizing now in 2026, or we had different funding gaps and we've kind of pushed that one aside and come up with a new one? Could you just speak to that in general?
I can, yes. I would say, and at the retreat, we talked about the eras of Sound Transit, and the challenge we're facing now is one the agency has faced 3 times. The last time in 2021 with the name realignment, but also following the ST2 system plan adoption in the Great Recession, and then also associated with the Central Link project and some of the challenges there. I think that we are trying to draw lessons from each of those approaches in terms of how they might make sense or not here. I think the tiers in the 2021 realignment action really were based on the amount of schedule delay associated with where those projects ended up. And so and that is to say the really the blunt instrument used in that process was schedule delay. And so in tier 1, it was a couple of years, and then to tier 4, it was like moved to the very back of the program. And I think we've actually been, and there's a mention of this in a later slide, generally speaking, the approaches developed have not incorporated any schedule delay. I think reflecting a little bit of what came out of the realignment process, which was a technical advisory group, which was emphasizing the importance of time is money and delay adds costs. And I think really instilling that ethic of the value, the cheapest time to deliver projects is now. And so I think that's where I will stop. And I hope that was a good answer to your question.
Let me just a quick follow-up. So to Board Member Wilson on the Graham station, I mean, that could be delivered pretty quick. And so does that then factor in that, like, we got some low-hanging fruit, some wins we could get in the near future? Did that play a part now in how we want to categorize or prioritize projects?
It's certainly the type of input we're looking for. I think the challenge will remain general affordability, and the fact that there is more capacity in the early part of the program. When we have especially our large projects being delivered all at the same time, that's when we hit those sort of debt financing thresholds that then mean we can't actually deliver as much as we would like. So I think that's the type of feedback we're looking for in terms of the value of projects relative to the capacity the agency has at any given time. And it looks like Callie would like to jump in as well.
Go ahead.
Let me just, one last follow-up. Saturday was an amazing day. That was a huge deliverable to the entire region. I don't know when the next deliverable will be. Maybe it's a few years out. I think there's a tremendous value in working with our regional community that says we've got a couple maybe smaller short-term wins we could get, in reference again to the Graham Street station, that would say we are fulfilling these promises from, be it Sound Move or ST3. And I think if we can grab these short-term wins and not at the expense of anything, but noticing that the next big ribbon cutting that we will do is probably quite a few years out. And I think there'd be tremendous value just in working with our regional community. Thank you.
Great. And this is Chief of Staff Callie Knight. Thanks, Board Chair. I do want to also flag for the last realignment, the magnitude of the cost allowed for schedule to kind of push the projects out in the schedule. The gravity of our affordability challenge now does not allow us to just push projects out in that 20-year duration of the long-range finance plan. And so just wanting to flag that that's one key difference between the last process and this one. Thank you very much.
Chair, this is Walker.
Yes, go ahead.
I'll just be really brief because I do want to get into these next pieces. I'm very encouraged to hear both today with the executive committee and in conversations I've had to date, a general interest in figuring out how we get there, not if we get there. And I think so many of the, and I think Board Member Mello talked about this, sort of clarifying what we mean in different projects with different terms. That's going to be really, really important as we deliver this to the community so that they can see a path forward, even if it wasn't the path that they specifically wanted. At least we can show them exactly how we get there, quite literally. The only thing I just wanted to, I guess two things I just wanted to add or reflect again. That conversation, and you responded to this, Alex, so this is maybe an offline conversation about that sounder trips and the dates around that. I hope we can relook at that. I realize it takes quite a bit of negotiation with our partners. But I think to my board colleagues in the room, this is one of those low-hanging fruit that we can deliver for riders. So I want to relook at that and how we're approaching it. And then just to highlight again what Board Member Mello said about that TCC link extension and getting more information before we make decisions there, but making sure that we're moving forward with the right questions before we deliver the answer. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Before we move on, just a word, and we hear this in the public comments, but to be absolutely clear to the public, when we finally do choose a path forward, and just hypothetically say the Ballard line, we think we can get to Seattle Center. That's it. That doesn't mean the planning, design work for the whole system all the way to Ballard. That does not stop. If we have funding opportunities or conditions change or come in under budget on a project as we're actually constructing it, we could, that further work to go farther would be in place. We would continue through the planning and permitting stage, particularly with federal agencies. And just so to be clear, nothing's been dropped. What we're struggling with is what the financial plan tells us we can actually afford to build given the revenues we have. So to be clear, Ballard has not been dropped, won't be dropped no matter what, but work will continue on that. The other thing I just wanted to put an emphasis on idea of new opportunities, particularly public-private partnerships throughout the system. We have, I think, some potential up in Snohomish County for some really interesting sites. You look around the world at transit systems, and there's a lot of private development, multi-use development that goes on around stations. And so I think that's something I'm very much interested in exploring also. And have been. So any other final questions before we move on? All right, let's proceed.
Okay. So we'll move into the final substantive section of today's presentation, which relates to identifying what we assess to be the most impactful opportunities to save costs or increase financial capacity across the 4 enterprise initiative work streams. So this is a slide we've shown many times in this calendar year, showing those 4 work streams and the different levers within them. And so I'll walk us through these 4 work streams now to reflect what we heard from board members in those small group breakouts at the board retreat, and then share our own responsiveness to the direction to bring back a smaller list of the most promising opportunities for board consideration. In some cases, we are still working to assess impact on those items that we could incorporate into an updated ST3 system plan. And I'll also note that you'll see other opportunities organized as ongoing in recognition of the need for either additional analysis or engagement with partner jurisdictions or the state legislature or both. A bit of wayfinding to draw your attention to is on the bottom of this slide. The icons represent at least one opportunity that is likely to require additional board discussion, or whether it saves costs or expands capacity. And so I'm also going to talk about these one at a time, and then pause again for discussion within each work stream area for board feedback, questions, discussion, etc. So starting with the policy opportunity register that identified 18 potential opportunities, with some of them overlapping with or influencing other enterprise work streams. Policy opportunities also implicate jurisdictions outside of the ST board. So in terms of what we believe we can incorporate before a Q2 action, that includes reconciling and updating link service assumptions based on an affordable capital program, which we anticipate will have cost implications given the difference between the full build of ST3 and what we know we will be able to afford within the current plan period. We also flagged as a board discussion needed around future Sound Transit Express service assumptions. So in the board retreat, we shared information related to different levels of investment in future ST Express service, with a lower level of investment resulting in approximately $500 million in cost savings, with a more standard one being a bit value neutral. And I'd also note that we heard different perspectives among board members about the direction to go with Sound Transit Express. And then finally, by the Q2 board action, we are working to update parking fee assumptions. This was something we did hear from board members in the policy and planning small group breakout as an opportunity to pursue. That is likely to require potential updates or modifications to the board's current policy around parking management, but that's fully within the board's control, and we're also working to assess what those changes might involve. And then very briefly moving through the column that lists ongoing through 2026 and beyond. This includes completing the long-range plan update per the motion adopted last August, directing work on the enterprise initiative, as well as initiating potential HCT planning studies per board direction. We are also planning to update service standards and create a network plan that I think will give us a better basis for how our longer range service assumptions are realized over time. We certainly heard support for more active engagement in Olympia around policy topics like the 75-year bond term, continued work on permitting reform, and potential opportunities around value capture and TOD. With respect to fares, we heard an interest in beginning with how we increase fare compliance first before turning to increasing fare rates. And just acknowledging that the board did direct staff to do work around a fare gates pilot. I believe that's scheduled for an update in the spring or summer. And then finally, to do additional work on public-private partnership opportunities. We certainly heard interest in how that might support delivery of parking investments. But as the board chair noted, it is not exclusive to parking investments. And so again, I'll pause with the purpose of pausing to answer any questions, ensure that we heard what we heard reflects what you did at the board retreat, and any other commentary you'd like to provide on the policy and planning opportunities identified.
Yes, Board Member Burney.
Thanks so much. This is really helpful in context with everything else. One of the areas that you didn't mention, but I'm curious about, on the light rail opening on Saturday, I had the opportunity to talk with Senator Cantwell about federal support. And one of the things that's going through Congress right now is the Surface Transportation Reauthorization Bill, and in that is transit funding. And I think there's an opportunity for us to be engaged on that to ensure that there is could be funding coming through to us. So I would love to add that to the list of opportunities to focus. For focus, we have been very successful in the past with federal funding for many of our projects, and I want to make sure that we are staying tuned into that as well. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
Constantine?
Yeah, no.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to let you know in response to Board Member Burney's observation that we are, in fact, very engaged with our federal delegation and our representatives in Washington, D.C. around funding, both in these major funding packages in what used to be called earmarks, and in reform of the federal permitting process, which has bipartisan interest. Reducing the amount of time that it takes to move through that process could reduce the time it takes to deliver our projects and reduce the cost of those projects. And across the country, this conversation is going on right now. And while we may have many areas of disagreement in our politics today, this is one where there seems to be a great deal of bipartisan conversation going on. So thank you for relaying that conversation you have with Senator Cantwell, and I look forward to our continued work with our very excellent federal delegation.
Is there anybody in the boardroom? I can't see.
Yes, Chair, this is Walker.
Yes, Board Member Walker.
Thank you.
I have a couple questions on how some of these things are going to get sorted out. I am particularly interested in the Sound Transit Express conversation, as you know. Did you say where, like, is this at a committee? Is it, how are we sorting through these Sound Transit Express service assumptions?
It's a great question. I guess I would say I think it's good for us to identify that this was just a matter of differing perspectives among board members. And again, I think recognizing that ST Express as a mode is going to serve different purposes in different parts of the district. And I think in terms of how do we address it, there's a next step slide at the very end that indicates sort of continued board member engagement. So I think we can certainly engage directly or within sub areas to better understand sort of where there is maybe an interest in more service in different parts of the district. I also think that there is an ability to, that our long range finance plan is updated regularly. So any kind of decision in terms of what to incorporate for now, particularly as it relates to how we think about updating service standards and what a network plan might look like, could also serve to help confirm or update or modify the long range planning assumptions. So, and certainly I think we staff are happy to come back to executive committee, RIO, full board with additional information and to support additional discussion.
Great, thank you. Obviously, I very much like to be part of that conversation because ST Express serves a really specific purpose in the South Sound that I think is different than the rest of the system. And importantly, to this larger conversation, want to understand how much money we're talking about, because it seems like a small piece that's being elevated to like, we're going to solve billions of dollars with something that's really, really hard on South Sound riders. So I want to be thoughtful about how that comes forward in the bigger picture. And then my other question, you have a note in there about high capacity transit planning studies. How are we engaging with our partners through that work? I know Pierce Transit has high capacity transit in their long range plan. I'm assuming our other local partners do as well. Where does that fit in with what was part of ST3, and I know we're always talking to our partners, but in terms of the enterprise, how do we work with partners?
I would say a few things in response to that. First is recognizing any decision to update the ST3 system plan is likely to carry with it implications for the broader regional transit network. And so depending on what those are, we'll certainly be engaged, generally speaking, and then through individual project contexts about the implications, as Executive Zahalai noted, related to Seattle Center and Smith Cove, that carries significant implications for King County Metro. I would also say more broadly related to our long-range planning work, certainly aware of Pierce Transit's long-range plan. I understand that King County Metro is also about to engage in an update to their own long-range plan. So I think, we do have a region in which multiple transit operators deliver service that passengers rely on, and that our shared interest is in how we collectively provide that service, given that passengers don't often care who's operating. They just want to get to where they're going. And then finally, typically the planning studies themselves are specific to corridors. The ST3 plan identified a set of different corridor studies. And so I think depending on what those planning studies might end up looking like, that would then be another venue to engage the relevant transit operators.
Great, thank you. And then the last thing I want to flag how important that state legislative program is. And I know everybody's talking about this, but just want to be very clear that as a board member, I'm here and ready to help with that. And I know that having those meetings now in the interim before session is really important. So the same question is, where is that work happening? I'm assuming that's an executive committee function, but I know we don't usually see the plan until November, December. So I'm wondering, Chair, if it's possible to bring something forward to be really intentional this year in the interim. Thank you. And thank you, Alex, for all the work.
Yeah, that sounds totally appropriate to me. The off season is as important or more than the season. Thank you. Anybody else in the boardroom?
Yes. Board Member Wilson here.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for this, and just want to add to what Board Member Walker says about state legislative agenda. Very much in favor of working hard together to figure out what we need from the legislature and doing the work now to make sure that we can be successful there. And yeah, a lot of things here that I support. I think eager to learn more about public-private partnership opportunities, definitely adjusting our parking policies. And I have some questions about fair gate programs, but eager to learn more about what the thinking is there and our options.
Thank you.
Okay.
So I'll move us along to the transit operations work stream. So the transit operations opportunity register identified 26 potential opportunities that were organized by asset management, resiliency, core capacity, and governance, revenue, and policy. In terms of what we believe we can incorporate before a Q2 action, includes confirming state of good repair and resiliency cost assumptions. I would note that the information we provided back in August 2025, where we initially quantified the program affordability challenges that were then summarized in the fall update of the long-range finance plan, did make a set of placeholder assumptions for potential cost risk. And we are on track to really confirm whether we believe those risks will be realized or not. I also know that later today, the Rider Experience and Operations Committee is hearing an update on communications-based train control, which is one of those opportunities that comes with both an upfront cost, but potential for a longer-term cost savings. Related to the previous work stream, we do expect to have updated light rail vehicle costs based on capital program and service changes coming out of the enterprise initiative. And then finally, again, in one of those placeholder figures in the August 2025 and then long-range finance plan update in the fall, did presume some growth related to future needs for agency staffing levels, and that it remains an opportunity to potentially incorporate. And then as it relates to ongoing work, we are underway on a strategic workforce study. We are still in this period of growing as a system. As everyone has noted, last weekend was a big milestone for the agency and for the region. And as we just begin to deliver the service, operate and maintain those new assets and the assets that we've brought online in the recent past, this strategic workforce study will help confirm future needs as well. One of the opportunities that we identified in the opportunity register included assessing operating models, recognizing that we do have a varied approach for delivering service on Link, on ST Express, soon to on Stride, and then particularly with the vehicle maintenance function for Sounder. And so an ongoing piece of work will be to understand whether there are either cost savings opportunities or at least more predictability and certainty about costs relative to how we deliver the service that passengers rely on. And then finally, I think coming out of the board retreat, we did hear an interest in understanding more of a schedule and implementation plan for how state of good repair and resiliency investments will be made, and the obviously the operational and passenger impacts that may come along with those. So that also is in the kind of ongoing work program. And so again, I'll stop here to see if there are any questions, if this reflects input via the board retreat and any other commentary board members would like to provide.
Any comments? Questions?
Chair, this is Walker.
Yes, go ahead.
I thank you, Alex, for bringing up the Rio conversation we're going to have today. We will get a briefing on the CBTC, which I think is something a lot of us learned a lot about at the board retreat. I'm intrigued by, and I think has capacity here to save a lot of costs, but has some upfront costs. So for anybody who's interested, tune in to Rio. I'm sure that will be a great conversation. And I think that it's awesome that so many of these have the green cost saving line there. I think understanding what those costs are and what the investments are, either time or money, will be really important to deciding what we're going to work on. How will we get that information, or will we be able to get that? What's green line or green graphic is good. How much?
Yes, and I would say this is really the category or the work stream where we have more work to do to assess and analyze. Indeed, the person you'll hear from this afternoon, Shankar Rajaram, is hard at work on a couple of these. And so our expectation is, again, getting some sense that directionally we're moving down the right path will enable us to then kind of put pen to paper and bring back a sense of what does that mean for just overall state of good repair funding in the ST3 plan. We do expect to need, at least in the current finance plan duration, fewer light rail vehicles. It's just a matter of we don't know exactly how many fewer just yet. And then some of the agency staffing levels may be, I think it will be in development with agency leadership and our finance department to ensure that it doesn't put sort of service delivery, the capital program, any of our core functions at risk in terms of the capacity needed to deliver. So I would say more to come in the coming weeks is maybe the expectation I'll set for these.
Anyone else? Okay. Well, Board Member Wasco.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to take an opportunity, not necessarily about any of the specifics in the presentation, other than the economic development and the public-private partnerships. And in speaking as a Pierce board member, and specifically as a representative from a small city in a county that is not yet served by Lightlink Rail, I want to make it clear that the City of Fife is going to be creative. This is going to be one of the most transformative opportunities to come to such a small town of 11,000 people and very few square miles. And we are getting close to the production of our economic development plan. It's new territory for us, so I will be looking to fellow board members as well as Sound Transit staff as we explore opportunities to make sure that the light rail station that is built in Fife is accessible to the surrounding community, specifically those south of us looking to get on light rail and have a reliable mode of transportation to Seattle. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm glad to be here at the executive committee meeting today, and it's been a great presentation. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on.
Okay. I will move onto the Finance Opportunity Register, which identified 24 potential opportunities. And I would also note that the most promising and impactful of these were already incorporated into the fall 2025 Long Range Finance Plan update. These opportunities were organized by board policy options, debt and financing, and third-party funding, which includes federal grants. In terms of what we believe we can incorporate before a Q2 action, we have heard, I think, loud and clear through the retreat about the implementation of remaining rental car tax authority. And I would note that the information provided through the board retreat estimated the impact of that at approximately $200 million with an assumed start in 2028. I think we have some more work to do to understand when exactly that could take effect. And I would also note, Board Member McLeod, to your previous question, that revenue source is allocated based on where it's generated. And my understanding is South King is approximately 70% of that. We can certainly follow up with all board members about what that breakdown looks like. In addition, we expect to have updated federal grant assumptions per a modified capital program. And then also heard feedback around taking action to align our debt service coverage ratio and other financial policies to be in line with national peers. We expect all of these to be in that expanding financial capacity category. And then ongoing through 2026 and beyond, we did identify sort of multiple avenues related to partnerships with local governments to either use available debt capacity or other third-party funding. And that is something we expect to hear, and I think builds also off of Board Member Roscoe's comment just now. And then I think to a point made, generally speaking, to this last bullet of, the board is going to have to take an action to update ST3. And I think what that will also require us to do is to continue solving the problem in front of us. And that will include pursuit of any kind of new funding that is out there, and with the objective of delivering as much of ST3 as possible. So again, I'll pause here for any questions, feedback, commentary on these set of opportunities.
Chair, this is Walker.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Just really quickly, a couple of these things feel a little bit more straightforward. And I know in talking to board colleagues, a lot of us are supportive of them. Do we need to wait on all of these actions to bring them forward with a bigger package? The capital questions to me are more complicated, more nuanced, more political. Could we just say yes to some of these things next month, for example? Or do we want to bring it all together? And that's maybe a question more for our board chair or our CEO than for you, Alex.
Maybe I'll start just to say, I think we certainly today is about direction and understanding if we're on the right path. We can certainly assess and provide information about sort of what may just be assumptions that we update and don't even require board action, like the federal grant assumptions, versus there are a few that maybe could be made in an action to update ST3, but others may require follow-on work. And certainly what we can take as an action item here is, of those that we're identifying for Q2 board action, I think just does that mean like it's done, or does it mean there will be some follow-on activities requiring the board? But CEO Constantine, board chair.
I mean, thank you, Mr. Chair. That's correct. And I think that the opportunity here is for the board to assess with our, information we're providing, the potential benefit and the potential risk of some courses of action, and to give us direction about which items to further pursue to try to flesh them out to see if they can be built into the long-range financial plan. The nuts and bolts of the capital program are, complicated and yet tangible. Some of these other items, how much do you assume about any particular aspect of finances over the course of 20 years, are as much art as science. And the board is ultimately the one that's responsible for the assumptions that we're going to build that financial plan on. So we're going to bring you as much information as possible, our guidance and recommendations, and then proceed based on your direction.
Yeah, on this and other topics, to the extent we can get this information, the same sort of questions through the sub areas, so that each of the sub areas has a chance to talk about it, and then come back here, and then finally up to the board. I think we've got some work to do to sort through the process. Each one of these is a little different path, but they're all important to kind of land and bring home. So we'll come back with a better answer to that question.
Okay. Well, I have
go ahead.
I have just one more slide. Just want to be mindful of time. So one more slide in addition to then a next step slide. So the final work stream is the capital delivery opportunity register, includes multiple hundred potential opportunities, many of which are incorporated into the capital program approaches that we presented at the retreat. By the Q2 board action, we do want to finalize a modified capital program that incorporates those board level cost savings, which you might know as lever 3 or lever 4, given the past presentations from the capital delivery teams. In addition, we are going to consider a targeted schedule delay, recognizing that part of the challenge we are trying to solve is adherence to statutory requirements around legal debt capacity. Moving projects in time is one tool to achieve that. And while we haven't really addressed that yet, we do want to be opportunistic as we get towards a ST3 plan update. And then in terms of ongoing work, the first activity here is really just committing to our cost savings work plan that was directed by the board in late 2024, continuing to, as projects advance in planning and design, be opportunistic about how we can save costs without sacrificing passenger experience or operational integrity. And then finally, ongoing work will include partnering with various permitting authorities, but most especially our local jurisdiction partners on how to streamline regulatory processes in service to speeding project delivery. And so again, I'll pause here for any questions, feedback, or other commentary from board members.
Member Bernie.
Thanks. And I know we're been going on a while, but I wanted to thank you for putting on the streamlining processes to the CEO's comment about federal process streamlining. I think locally we can take a look at that as well. And I just need to brag about Redmond around this, that we were able to do some pretty great work when we were moving through to get the 2-line open in Redmond and our stations. And so I'm hopeful that the staff has that kind of expertise on board to help those jurisdictions work through things a little bit faster. As we all know, time is money, and we are limited on money. So we want to make sure that we're able to going as quickly through those systems safely. So would love to hear more about that and kind of the trajectory of how we're going to make that happen system-wide. Thanks.
Thank you.
Anybody in the boardroom? No, my only comment, particularly in this one, the levers, there was kind of clear at the board retreat, there was some confusion or ambiguity about which levers had already kind of been pulled and were in the current cost estimates and which hadn't. I just, urge staff to work through the sub areas with a very clear, perhaps list, and try to get as best agreement as we can out of the sub areas on what levers they want pulled and what they definitely don't, and maybe some maybes, but just having a clear list so everybody understands what the plan is going forward is really critical. We had a great conversation about some potentials in the Snohomish sub area to save some significant money. I need to work back through the sub area to do that, but that's the kind of process that I really think is valuable to the board members. So it's pretty clear which levers are included and which are not, and the implications. Anyway, that's just asking staff to make sure that we're very clear on that.
We'll do that.
Okay, next steps.
Okay, so this is my last slide, and really is just next steps in a path to updating ST3. CEO Constantine mentioned some of our activities underway around public engagement. We are imminently planning to launch an online survey to gather feedback that way. We'll continue to engage board members directly and through your various sub-area briefings. And I will thank the executive committee for all of this feedback. It will help us as we get to May pull some of these different threads together to the earlier discussion around ensuring that we are complying with the board and voter approved sub-area equity policies. Do expect to bring back additional information both about overall impact, shape of the capital program, and the component pieces of an updated ST3 as soon as next month. And that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any additional questions if there are any.
Thank you, Alex. Any final questions or comments?
Chair,
Yes,
this is Walker again.
Yes.
Just really quickly. So I feel like I've heard many different answers to the question of when we're going to make decisions. And so just want to be really clear that I'm on the right talking points for this. The first board meeting that we could make a decision on enterprise initiative would be like July. Is that what I'm hearing? I heard a no from our CEO. So
I'll take a cut at this, if I may. Board Member Walker, Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
We're working to continue these conversations with board members and the public so that as soon as the May board meeting, the board would have an opportunity to adopt a new system plan, which would then be the basis for the long-range financial plan. That is the most optimistic date by which that action could get done. But the sooner it's done, the sooner we will be able to move on with the capital program. Alex, did you want to add anything to that, or Callie?
Yeah, I will just flag the motion that the board passed in August directed us to complete the system plan update by the end of Q2. So we're targeting May or June for that vote.
Anything else? All right. Thank you. Thank you, Alex. Do we want to go onto the participation in the City of Bellevue's tax increment area? I think we have to have that conversation. I'll call Marshall Foster. Yes.
I was just going to say, Marshall Foster's ready with his team to come forward.
Great.
And I'm sure he can be very concise in this presentation.
Sorry. There we go. Thank you. Chair Summers, board members, it's great to be with you. Marshall Foster, Chief Planning and Development Officer at Sound Transit. And I'm here today with Kristen Mate, who is our Finance and Planning Analysis Manager, and Madeline Tharp, who is Senior Legal Counsel for Sound Transit. And just on a personal note, it's a pleasure. This is my first presentation at a Sound Transit board meeting, and it's wonderful to be part of your organization. We are here today to describe a proposal coming forward from the City of Bellevue regarding a tax increment area that could be established in their city. Next slide, please. Just a little context on what is a tax increment area. How is it used under our state law? Essentially, this is a tool which allows local cities to finance public improvements by capturing increases in property value over time. It creates a revenue stream through that property value that they can bond against to build capital, essentially. Under state law, they can exist for no more than 25 years or until the improvements have been fully financed, whichever is shorter. This is a unique use of tax increment. It's not a widely used tool in our state. In this case, all governing bodies who are affected in that jurisdiction need to vote to participate in that. And in this case, Sound Transit is one of those affected jurisdictions. Excuse me. Could I have the next slide, please? So what would the tax increment district finance? As I think many of you know, the City of Bellevue has a project called the Grand Connection, which would create a pedestrian and bike connection, a new bridge across 405, connecting the Overlake area, the East Rail project to downtown Bellevue and to the downtown Bellevue light rail station. So essentially, it would provide an access improvement to the station from the east side of Bellevue. Next slide. And then just to discuss the impacts to Sound Transit, I will turn it over to Kristen.
Good afternoon, Chair Summers and members of the Executive Committee. I'm Kristen Mates, Financial Planning and Analysis Manager. I'm here to share the financial impact of Bellevue's proposed tax increment area on Sound Transit. Using Bellevue's project analysis, which was submitted to the Office of the State Treasurer, our team determined that Sound Transit could lose between $6 million and $9 million in property tax revenue from implementation of this tax increment area, or about $250,000 to $350,000 per year. This represents about 0.1% of Sound Transit's projected property tax revenue during that time, and a smaller portion of our projected overall tax revenue of about 0.01%. I'm going to hand it back to Marshall to talk about next steps, and happy to answer any questions at the end of the presentation.
All right, thank you, Kristen. Could I have the next slide, please? So essentially, this is the proposal that's brought forward by the City of Bellevue. Our next step is that this will be brought to the full board meeting later this month, and we have the option of either participating fully or partially in Bellevue's TIA. So we will have more discussion at the full board meeting. And with that, I'll take the next slide. That concludes our presentation, and we are happy to answer any questions.
Could you just explain quickly why there's a timeliness issue here, or why we are being asked to take action now?
Yes, I'm going to hand that to Madeline. Thank you, Chair.
Great question, Chair Summers. Madeline Tharp, Senior Legal Counsel. This tax increment finance district is being formed pursuant to some special legislation that requires any TIF that is formed to be in effect by the end of June of this year. The City of Bellevue has indicated that they're bringing their ordinance forward next month. So if the board would like to participate, you need to take an action before the city adopts their ordinance.
Thank you. Yep, thank you. And I guess the last question is, obviously this affects a fairly small amount, but it's is this accredited to the sub area, or how does that work?
That is a question we'll have to come back to you with an answer to, Chair Summers, in terms of the specific effect on the sub area, in terms of the actual assignment of that cost.
Yep. Thank you. Any other questions? Comments?
Yes, Board Member Wilson here.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so just if I understand how this works correctly, so Sound Transit does not have to participate. The project can move forward. The TIF or the tax increment area can move forward without Sound Transit. So this is just like by deciding to participate, we're basically saying like, yes, the increment of property taxes that will be created, we think will be created due to this improvement, we're pitching into the project. Is that what we're doing?
That's my understanding. Madeline?
Board Member Wilson, that is correct. The option here is if we vote to participate, then the Sound Transit property tax in the increment area is withheld through the life of the TIF. If you don't take a vote, or you decide to take a vote and the vote fails, then Sound Transit's property tax will not be affected by the TIF, and it will continue on without receiving the increment that is associated with our property tax.
Okay, understood.
Brings to mind that at the board meeting, we probably ought to have somebody from either the city or proposing this to answer any questions about what the impact of us not participating is, and participating, how significant that is to the success of the project that they want to accomplish.
We will definitely arrange, Chair Summers, for us to have City of Bellevue representation at that discussion.
Yep. All right, any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, that is the end of our agenda here today. There's no need for an executive session. There is no other business. So our next executive committee meeting is scheduled for Thursday, May 7th at 10:30 a.m. Please note 10:30 to 12:30. It's longer than our usual meeting time to accommodate discussions regarding the enterprise initiative. And the meeting will take place in the Ruth Fisher boardroom and virtually via Zoom. The link to join the meeting virtually will be provided on the Sound Transit website, as well as the meeting agenda. And I just want to thank you for great discussion and participation today. To committee members, thank you so much. And thanks to staff for an excellent job. We are adjourned.